What will happen to Donald Trump if tariffs kill small businesses nationwide? What happens when political bluster meets economic reality? Donald Trump has spent years championing tariffs as a tool to punish foreign competitors. But now those very tariffs are turning into a ticking time bomb for small businesses across America. From family-owned farms to neighborhood hardware stores, entrepreneurs are watching costs skyrocket and profits vanish, leaving entire communities on edge. The irony is striking. The man who promised to protect American jobs may be fueling the downfall of the very backbone of the U.S. economy. If these small businesses collapse under the weight of tariffs, what will that mean for Trump's political future and his grip on working-class voters? Stay tuned as we break it down right now. Donald Trump has long branded himself as the champion of American business. His political rise was powered by promises of economic nationalism, bringing back jobs, punishing foreign competitors, and shielding U.S. workers from unfair trade practices. Tariffs were his weapon of choice, and he wielded them with the swagger of a showman who believed that economic leverage alone could bend nations, corporations, and entire industries to his will. Yet, beneath the spectacle, tariffs function like a double-edged sword. While they may punish competitors abroad, they often inflict collateral damage at home. In the United States, small businesses, long celebrated as the backbone of the economy, find themselves among the most vulnerable victims. When tariffs drive up costs for raw materials, components, and finished goods, small firms cannot rely on economies of scale to absorb the shock. Unlike multinational giants, they lack the capital cushions and global supply chains that can offset the damage. This raises the central question: what will happen to Donald Trump if tariffs kill small businesses nationwide? The implications extend far beyond economics. They touch on political legitimacy, voter loyalty, and the narrative Trump has built around himself as the savior of American enterprise. To answer this, we must examine the intersection of Trump's trade policies, the realities of small business economics, and the broader political consequences that unfold when rhetoric collides with reality. From the 2016 campaign onward, Trump positioned himself as the only candidate willing to fight for American workers and small business owners. His message was blunt, often delivered with the cadence of a rally chant: "They're taking our jobs, they're taking our factories, and we're going to take them back." For many voters in industrial and rural communities, this rhetoric resonated. Trump's narrative was rooted in the idea of betrayal. Politicians of both parties, he argued, had sold out American workers by allowing free trade agreements and global supply chains to hollow out domestic manufacturing. Tariffs, in Trump's telling, were not a tax on consumers, but a patriotic tool to level the playing field. By punishing imports, he claimed, foreign competitors would have no choice but to relocate production to the United States. But Trump's economic populism often obscured the complexity of the issue. While tariffs may protect a narrow set of industries, steel, aluminum, and certain manufacturing niches, they raise costs for all downstream businesses that rely on those materials. A hardware store that sources nails, a brewery that buys aluminum cans, or a small manufacturer dependent on imported parts feels the weight of tariffs far more acutely than a multinational conglomerate. The contradiction is built into the policy itself. Trump branded himself as the businessman-in-chief, yet his reliance on tariffs exposed a profound misunderstanding of how interconnected global supply chains had become. What plays well as a nationalist slogan rarely functions as sustainable economic policy. To understand the stakes, it is crucial to examine how tariffs operate in practice. A tariff is a tax on imports. When the Trump administration imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum, the price of those commodities rose. For small manufacturers, whether they build farm equipment, craft beer kegs, or custom furniture, the increase in costs squeezed already thin profit margins. Large corporations, with diversified suppliers and global networks, could adjust more easily. They could shift production, negotiate bulk contracts, or pass costs on to consumers. Small businesses, however, found themselves in a vice. They either absorbed the cost and watched profits vanish, or they raised prices and risked losing customers in a competitive marketplace. The result was not theoretical. During Trump's presidency, industry groups repeatedly warned of the damage. The National Federation of Independent Business surveyed owners who reported higher input costs and reduced investment. In agriculture, tariffs triggered retaliatory measures from China, slamming soybean farmers and rural communities that had overwhelmingly voted for Trump. The transcript provided highlights how even within conservative circles, the consequences were visible. Former Vice President Mike Pence pointed to layoffs at John Deere, an iconic brand rooted in American farming, as tariffs pushed costs skyward. When firms like John Deere lay off hundreds due to trade policies, the ripple effect cascades through local economies, striking not only employees but also small suppliers, diners, service providers, and local governments reliant on tax revenues. Tariffs, in other words, are not abstract tools of negotiation. They shape the daily realities of towns and neighborhoods, hollowing out the very communities Trump promised to uplift. What makes this issue particularly striking is the gap between Trump's rhetoric and the outcomes. Trump thrives on political theater. He revels in symbolic battles, mocking opponents, claiming victories over cultural flashpoints, and staging himself as the protagonist in a drama of national renewal. The transcript illustrates this dynamic vividly. While Trump and his allies spar with figures like California Governor Gavin Newsom over cultural issues ranging from logos to hand gestures, the economic fallout of tariffs continues in the background. Trump's critics, including Newsom, leverage these contradictions to undermine his credibility. Mockery becomes a weapon, but it is grounded in substantive failures. Small business closures or layoffs cannot be spun away with slogans. When a local factory shuts its doors or when farmers lose markets abroad, voters feel the consequences in their bank accounts. Tariffs may have been designed as an attack on China, Mexico, or Europe, but their immediate casualties are American entrepreneurs and workers. This disconnect leaves Trump exposed. His opponents can, and do, frame him as a fraud, a man who branded himself as a savior of business while implementing policies that suffocate the very sector he vowed to protect. The danger for Trump is not merely economic mismanagement, but political dissonance. If voters conclude that his promises collapse under scrutiny, his image as a businessman president disintegrates. Trump's reliance on tariffs must be understood in historical perspective. Trade wars are not new. In the 1930s, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act is widely blamed for deepening the Great Depression by triggering retaliatory tariffs and collapsing global trade. Economists have long warned that protectionist measures often backfire, producing more harm than good. Trump, however, framed his policies as bold, unconventional, and necessary to rebalance a rigged system. Yet the parallels to Smoot-Hawley are clear: rising costs, retaliation from trading partners, and harm to domestic businesses. The difference lies in scale and speed. In a 21st century economy defined by just-in-time supply chains, global sourcing, and digital integration, disruptions cascade more rapidly. A tariff on steel affects not only U.S. manufacturers, but also construction firms, auto plants, and infrastructure projects. The consequences are not isolated. They spread across sectors, magnifying instability. For small businesses, which often operate on thin margins and rely heavily on predictable supply chains, the effects are devastating. The very sectors Trump claimed to champion, manufacturing, farming, small retail, bear the heaviest burden. Consider the agricultural sector. When Trump imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, China retaliated by targeting American soybeans. Farmers across the Midwest, many of whom supported Trump enthusiastically, suddenly lost their largest export market. Small farming operations already struggling with volatile prices and rising debt faced ruin. The administration attempted to cushion the blow with subsidies, but these were temporary patches. Farmers do not operate on quarterly timelines. They rely on stable markets built over decades. Once lost, those markets are not easily regained. In manufacturing, small firms that produce niche goods, such as custom machine parts or aluminum-based products, reported spiraling costs. Some shuttered entirely. In retail, small businesses dependent on imported goods faced higher prices, forcing them to compete with giants like Walmart or Amazon, which had greater leverage to absorb costs. These examples demonstrate how tariffs function less as a scalpel and more as a sledgehammer. While they may strike foreign competitors, they shatter fragile domestic enterprises in the process. If tariffs kill small businesses nationwide, the political consequences for Donald Trump could be severe. His brand is inseparable from the promise of prosperity. Unlike traditional politicians who may survive policy missteps, Trump's entire persona rests on the image of a successful businessman who can translate his private sector savvy into public sector success. When small business owners, once among his strongest supporters, feel betrayed, the political backlash could be decisive. These entrepreneurs are not abstract figures. They are pillars of local communities, respected voices in towns and counties across America. Their disillusionment carries weight. Moreover, the collapse of small businesses undermines the broader Republican narrative of being the party of entrepreneurs and economic growth. Democrats, as illustrated in the transcript by Newsom's relentless mockery, can frame Trump not only as incompetent, but as actively destructive. They can argue that his policies dismantled the backbone of the American economy while enriching elites and leaving ordinary workers stranded. The optics are powerful. Layoffs, shuttered storefronts, and declining main streets cannot be spun away with tweets or rallies. They represent lived realities that voters carry into the ballot box. Of course, Trump is not without defenses. He has long mastered the art of shifting blame. If small businesses collapse under tariffs, he could argue that foreign nations are at fault for engaging in unfair practices. He could blame Democrats for obstructing his broader economic agenda or accuse the media of exaggeration. Trump's strategy often relies on creating cultural battles to distract from economic failures. As the transcript shows, disputes over logos, hand gestures, and symbolic issues often dominate the discourse. For his base, these battles can reinforce loyalty by framing Trump as the perpetual victim of a hostile establishment. Yet distraction has limits. While culture wars can energize, they cannot replace paychecks. When livelihoods vanish, even loyal supporters may reconsider their allegiance. Trump's counter-narratives may delay accountability, but they cannot erase the material consequences of failed policies. The collapse of small businesses due to tariffs would not only damage Trump politically, but also reshape the American economy. Small businesses account for nearly half of private sector employment and are key drivers of innovation, local identity, and community stability. If tariffs accelerate their decline, the result would be increased consolidation in favor of large corporations. Giants like Amazon, Walmart, and multinational manufacturers could absorb market share, deepening inequality and reducing competition. Rural and small-town America, already fragile, would experience further erosion of opportunity. Such outcomes contradict Trump's populist message. Instead of restoring American greatness, his policies would accelerate the very trends, corporate dominance, rural decline, and economic dislocation that fueled discontent in the first place. The irony is striking. The self-proclaimed champion of the forgotten man would preside over his further marginalization. So, what will happen to Donald Trump if tariffs kill small businesses nationwide? The answer is twofold. Economically, the nation would face rising costs, declining entrepreneurship, and greater consolidation under corporate giants. Politically, Trump would face a crisis of legitimacy. His core promise that he alone could restore prosperity would stand exposed as hollow. Opponents like Gavin Newsom already sense the vulnerability, mocking Trump not merely for his rhetoric, but for the tangible consequences of his policies. As layoffs mount and businesses close, the mockery gains weight. Trump can attempt to deflect, distract, or blame others, but the evidence accumulates in empty storefronts, lost jobs, and shattered communities. In the end, Trump's fate is tied to the very businesses he claims to champion. If tariffs destroy them, they may well destroy him politically. The businessman president cannot survive the perception that he strangled American business with his own hand. The stakes are not confined to Trump himself. They touch on the future of American economic policy, the resilience of small businesses, and the political choices facing voters. If history is any guide, policies that undermine the backbone of the economy carry consequences not just for presidents, but for the nation as a whole. In the end, if tariffs continue to crush small businesses nationwide, Donald Trump will not just face political backlash, he will face the unraveling of one of his core narratives, being the self-proclaimed champion of the American worker. As small businesses collapse, unemployment rises, and supply chains weaken, the gap between Trump's promises and reality will grow impossible to ignore. What happens next could redefine his political future, eroding both his economic credibility and his support base. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth analysis. See you next time.